communism and people coming down, the domino effect was on, the communists are coming, the yellow
nuclear war,
all that stuff. So, the Antarctica melting is the new version of that, right? But I also think that children are exposed much more where they weren't 30 years ago, because you look at the violent games they have, PlayStation, I'm not picking on that, but other versions of that, Xbox or whatever it happens to be, there's a heck of a lot of violence that they're trained to inflict on people.
But there's no link between video games and violence, though, is it? It's not what you're saying, is it?
Well, that nobody's probably picked up on it yet, so maybe I've just started something new.
Okay,
but,
let's...
But, it was the Vietnam War on TV. We used to see people getting killed. We'd never seen that before. But, that's in the... and whether your parents are there or not, the soldiers still got killed.
Well, both my sons are pacifists and they were very into their video gaming, so I think...
Are they pacifists when they're on the football field?
Sort of ish, but they're committed to doing their best, yeah.
Okay, let's bring in founder of Chatbus, Avril Pearce. Avril, great to have you on the program.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yeah, so when did you realise that there was a need for this, this mobile service? What was the catalyst for it?
Well, that was way back in 2006. There was a spate of youth suicides in Dunedin, and I was quite a new counsellor and decided that we needed to do something about this, and obviously the system we had wasn't working, and so let's put some help in at a younger age. And so I started in the intermediate schools, just me and one little bus, and there were 3 intermediates in Dunedin I was working in. And now, 11 years later, there are 6 of us, and we're in 23 primary and intermediate schools in Dunedin, and expanding to Southland currently.
And what sort of response are you getting from the primary school aged children?
They are really open to talking about issues that are going on for them. They don't have the stigma about counselling that teenagers do in this country. And so, working with primary school kids, it's great. Like, I know from my own experience, I walk into a classroom and kids will say to me, "Why do you never pick me? How come I can't come to Chatbus?" They want to come. Sometimes I don't get it, what it's about, but obviously, it's a positive thing for them. And I said to one wee boy one day, "Do you know what Chatbus is?" And he said, "No, but the kids always come back so happy." So,
that's good.
That is good.
Well, we're almost right at the end of the show, Avril, so it was just nice to sort of sneak you in at the end, but thank you very much for being with us anyway. Yeah, Avril Pearce, founder of Chatbus. Pretty cool, isn't it, Catherine?
Oh, totally. And, doing exactly the work that needs to be done, and on their own, all donations, isn't it? It's not funded in any way.
Again, good on them if there's a need and they're meeting it. That's fantastic. And it is, don't forget, it is International Charity Day.
It's International Charity. Yeah, wonderful, Chris. Very good. A lot of response too about competition. I've got to say, Catherine. Nearly all of them are siding with you. So maybe you've hit something there.
I may have.
You don't.
I don't want to feel like a winner, but
Hey, own it just for this one day. You don't have to tell kids to be competitive.
It was a team effort, people.
Says Roger. They are anyway, but leave them alone to do their best. They don't need adults preaching to them about this. Just do your best.
Yep.
Agreed.
There you go, Vicky. Chris or Catherine Robinson, thank you very much for being on.
Thank you.
Panel. It's wonderful to have you on. I'm Wallace Chapman. Checkpoint next. I'm with you 3:45 for Friday's show, where we will talk about the vegan who hated the barbecue.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Tonight, water everywhere, but how do we make it fit to drink and swim in? The government unveils its freshwater plan. Fed Farmers reckons it could drive some people off the land. The Agriculture Minister accuses them of catastrophising. A young child is among those killed in the Rotorua crash. Survivors describe the brakes slamming on before the bus slid out of control. A Māori man with a full-face moko has been turned away from an Aussie restaurant. American travellers are officially warned about our measles outbreak. And is the new home ownership scheme announced as part of the Kiwi Build reboot really for low-income families? And an emotional Ryan Crotty is back in the All Blacks. RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, ko Susana Leata tēnei. A man accused of murdering a toddler has been found guilty of manslaughter instead. The jury in the High Court in Auckland returned its verdict this afternoon after deliberating for 15 hours. Tom Furley reports.
2-year-old Aria Roberts sustained an unsurvivable head injury while in the care of Aaron Archer in their Mangawhai home a year ago. The defence said he was swinging her around when she accidentally hit her head. The Crown said he deliberately assaulted her. Earlier this afternoon, the judge granted the jury leave to reach a majority verdict rather than a unanimous one, and the verdict was then delivered with one juror in disagreement. There were tears in the public gallery as the jury's decision was announced. Archer has been remanded in custody for sentencing next month. This is Tom Furley.
A survivor of yesterday's deadly bus crash near Rotorua says the bus swayed violently from side to side before flipping over. A young child and 4 adults were killed when the bus, which was carrying 27 Chinese tourists, crashed at Ngātira on State Highway 5. Some of the passengers were wearing seatbelts and some were left hanging from their seats when the bus rolled off the road. A retired woman who had been travelling with 6 of her friends says they only left China 3 days ago and she's in shock at what happened. Her words have been translated and revoiced.
The bus started to sway side to side very violently. It all happened very quickly and then it lost control and slipped off the road and flipped over.
A Chinese national caught up in yesterday's crash. The police say it is still too early to comment on how it happened. The government is lining up to do battle with farmers over its new plan to clean up lakes, rivers and other waterways. The main target is the farming sector, which faces tougher rules for land use and nitrate levels. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
If the plan announced today is adopted, there'd be limits on land use from 2020. For example, farmers wouldn't be able to convert to dairy or expand irrigation if there's evidence that would cause pollution. And in catchments with high nitrate levels, they'd have to take immediate action to reduce excessive leaching. Federated Farmers says the government seems prepared to see an end to pastoral land use in some parts of the country. And National says the plan would be a disaster for farmers and the economy. The government says New Zealanders expect action on fresh water and farmers, along with everyone else, will have to play their part. From Parliament, Jane Patterson.
A vaccinologist says the rising number of people who've contracted measles is deeply worrying. The figure for the worst outbreak in 22 years has now gone past the 1,000 mark to 1,050, nearly 900 of whom are in the Auckland region. Helen Petusis-Harris says it's sad it has taken such an outbreak to motivate people to get vaccinated.
We're now at a point where we've got about half the number of cases as we had in the 1997 epidemic, which was our last significant measles event.
Meanwhile, American citizens travelling or intending to travel to New Zealand have been warned about the outbreak. The US Centres for Disease Control and Prevention is recommending that people heading this way get vaccinated before leaving the United States. The United Nations estimates up to 70,000 people in the Bahamas are in need of immediate humanitarian relief in the wake of Hurricane Dorian. The powerful storm caused catastrophic damage on Great Abaco Island and Grand Bahama. The death toll has risen to 20 but is expected to climb significantly as rescuers search the wreckage. A community worker on Grand Bahama, C. Alan Johnson, says a massive rebuilding effort will be required.
On the ground, the team is making an assessment because water is just beginning to recede. We are in an extremely bad state. It's going to require a number of years for us to basically rebuild.
The hurricane, which had weakened from a Category 5 to a Category 2, has strengthened again to a 3 as it approaches the South Carolina coast. A Māori man living in Australia has been turned away from a Melbourne restaurant for having a tāmoko. Touch rugby coach Gary Harding had booked a table at Village Bell in St Kilda on Saturday as a thank you dinner for a group of visiting New Zealand touch rugby coaches. But he was turned away at the door by the bouncer, who told him facial tattoos were not allowed in the restaurant.
He was quite arrogant and didn't want to enter into any discussion about it, and basically just says, oh, no, it's not a good look. And by that time, I turned around to my partner and the crew that we were with and just said, oh, look, if that's the case, I don't want to be here.
Gary Harding says the bouncer refused to hear his explanation that tā moko is different to ordinary facial tattoos. He says he's had no response from the restaurant despite making repeated calls. It's 5 minutes past 5. Beauden Barrett is back at first 5 and Ben Smith returns to fullback for the All Blacks' last test before the World Cup. Richie Mo'unga is still recovering from the shoulder injury he suffered in the Bledisloe Cup win over Australia, meaning Barrett moves in from fullback and Ben Smith can reclaim the number 15 jersey. Coach Steve Hansen has made 5 personnel changes for Saturday's test against Tonga in Hamilton. Midfielder Ryan Crotty will play his first of the year after an injury-plagued season. The New Zealand tennis player Michael Venus and his Chinese Taipei partner Hou Qingchan are through to the final of the mixed doubles at the US Open in New York after a straight-set semi-final win. They will play Jamie Murray of Britain and American Bethany Mattock-Sands in the final on Sunday morning. Venus and Chan lost to Murray and Martina Hingis in the 2017 final, but Venus says they had never even met before that tournament, and 2 years on, they now know each other.
Definitely helps us out there. We understand each other's games a little bit more. So in some tighter situations, we can help each other out a little bit more. So I think that's helped us get through a couple tight spots in a few of the matches. And last time we went through quite a few 10-point tiebreakers. It was a bit more of a roller coaster. And this time, I think we've done it. We've won all the tiebreakers, which that always helps.
Michael Venus. A cannabis farm was raided after a Spanish TV helicopter following the Vuelta a España cycling race captured its location near Barcelona. The police seized 40 plants after being alerted to footage that showed 2 rooftop apartment plantations. That's the news.
Boris's Brexit botch up.
There are plenty of member states, I can tell you, who are thoroughly fed up of Britain and Brexit and want to get it done and dusted and aren't particularly minded to give Britain yet another extension.
Target scrapped.
I don't believe in pigs flying, and I just really do think that Kiwi Build has been a total disaster.
And a novel idea for Christchurch.
I think we should also trial freedom camping in the centre of the city.
Thinking outside the square, Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on air and online.
Then on 9 to noon, the government's plans to clean up our waterways. Have they got it right? And after 10, the couple made homeless in their 50s who walked the 1,000-kilometre Cornish salt path to stop their lives from completely falling apart. Join me, Lynn Freeman, in for Catherine Ryan on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to North Taranaki, including Taumaranui, Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty and Taupo. Showers, some heavy and possibly thundery, clearing Bay of Plenty and Taupo tomorrow evening. Southwesterly gales in exposed places north of Waikato. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, cloudy with scattered showers, some heavy inland. Rain tomorrow, possibly heavy in the north, easing tomorrow night. South Taranaki to Wellington, also Taihape and Wairarapa. Periods of rain, low cloud from Hawke's Bay to Wellington, clearing tomorrow. For Marlborough, Nelson and Buller, scattered rain, clearing from the east tomorrow evening. Westland and Fiordland, fine apart from isolated showers in Westland tonight. Canterbury, occasional rain or drizzle, turning to showers later tomorrow. Otago and Southland, fine spells, isolated showers tonight, cloudy periods and showers increasing tomorrow. Chatham Islands, rain with low cloud, nor'easterly gales easing early tomorrow morning. RNZ National, it's 5:08.
Thank you, Susanna. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. The government's unveiled its plan of action to clean up rivers and lakes around the country, but farmers already feel under attack. The proposed strategy, now out for consultation, would usher in a crackdown on land intensification and much tougher limits for nitrogen in waterways. All farms would need management plans addressing water quality, and there could be mandatory fencing and winter grazing standards. The opposition says it's a disaster for farmers and the economy. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch.
All 3 government parties campaigned on cleaning up the country's waterways. Today, the Environment Minister, David Parker, laid out his plan to do it.
The overwhelming majority of New Zealanders want us to act. They want to be able to swim in their local river in summer, to put their head under without the risk of getting crook.
The plan sets new standards for swimmability, tougher requirements for reducing nitrate pollution. It puts farmers squarely in the hot seat, with tighter rules around feedlots and keeping stock out of waterways. From June next year, they'll also find it much harder to intensify. no new irrigation or dairy conversions unless farmers can prove it won't pollute. The Agriculture Minister, Damien O'Connor, with a clear message.
What I want to see is best practice become normal practice.
The proposal's already stirring up disquiet, with federated farmers saying the sector's being thrown under the tractor, and says the targets are unnecessarily stringent, effectively unachievable, and will force farmers out of business. Beef and Lamb says it's being disproportionately punished, and Dairy NZ's Tim Mackle is warning of waning confidence.
This will be quite scary to farmers, quite frankly, in the sense that there's a lot going on for them right now.
The opposition lining up with those sector groups. National MP Todd Muller says the plan is a gut punch to the industry, a hammer blow to the economy.
We are simply not rich enough as a country to suggest that 60% of our exports should go south because of over-ambition around water quality.
But the government rejects suggestions of widespread closures.
That's a ridiculous statement.
It's an absurd suggestion.
Mr O'Connor says many farmers are already doing the right thing, proving it is possible. And he points to a $230 million fund to help farmers with the transition.
I don't think any farmer wants to see further degradation of the aquifers. They've been running in a system that's allowed them to do that. They haven't had clear guidelines. What we're now moving to do is to give those guidelines to try and prevent any further degradation. I think there'll be support for that, but the farmers do need to know clearly what they have to do.
The Freshwater Leaders Group, set up by the government to provide advice, says some of the reactions have been extreme. Its chair, John Pino, the founder of Sinlay Milk, accepts some farmers in the worst areas will need to change their way of farming. But he says that's nothing new.
Leading farmers change the way they're farming all the time. They're all learning, they're very capable, they're running sophisticated businesses, and they have no doubt that they'll be able to cope with these changes, and they already are. The leading farmers are doing all of these things.
He thinks most farmers, once they've had time to digest the proposals, will consider them fair. But the strength of feeling so far suggests it won't be an easy sell. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Craig McCulloch.
And going now to Federated Farmers' response there. So what do they really make of the proposals so far? Chris Allen is the Federated Farmers' spokesman on water quality, and he believes that the proposals are too ambitious.
Farmers don't like having to do one thing and then a few years later someone has a change of heart and whatever. But the big issue is about the nitrate issues and limits in water and what they actually mean in some catchments up and down the country. They're going to be pretty hard to meet.
OK, so let's look at that to begin with. The suggestion is that, well, one of the suggestions is a nitrate cap where you rank all the farms, you pick a point where you want everybody to be under, and everyone who's above that needs to get their levels down within a year. What's wrong with that?
Have you ever tried to do this yourself? A farming system goes from year to year, and sometimes it's over a series of years. And working out what is the thing that you do on your farm that actually has that impact. It might be very easy for someone from town to think, oh, it's just farming, it must be really simple. On our farm, for example, we've got 19 different soil types. Each one of those soils responds differently to the activities that we do on top of the land. So if I'm in a catchment, which is going to be one of those sensitive ones, what am I going to do that can actually limit my N-loss through the soil profile? And there's very limited options. I can cut back putting fertiliser on, but the grass still grows. I can probably cut back on the number of sheep or cattle or bit of cropping that I do, in which case it's going to affect my bottom line pretty quickly. So some of these things you can use technology. And if we're already picking up and using technology, what else can we do? So that's where farmers come up against it and say, well, what can we do if we're already doing the good stuff, but we have to make bigger cutbacks?
Well, as you say, you could get rid of cows and slow the use of fertilisers. If you are not sustainable, if you can't farm sustainably, why should you be left to just carry on?
Look, that is a really good point. But the other thing, this is a discussion document about where they're proposing to put the limits. So are the limits in the right place? They might be for vast parts of the country, in which case, yeah, that's good. In other parts of the country where there's a lot of production going on, someone's food's growing, and we're doing things and already trying to get to lower limits, and then you take the floor down below a certain level, you say, well, okay, perhaps those limits, do they need to be quite that low here or there? So we've got to look at timeframes, we've got to look at where the limits are. It's a discussion document, so let's have a robust discussion about that. Federated farmers, we've been shut right out of this process for the last 4 or 5 months, so this is quite a surprise of what we're looking at today, and it's a big document to try and get your head around what it actually means.
So what is your worst fear, that some farms will just simply have to go out of business in some areas because it's not sustainable to reach the levels that may be placed upon you, the constraints?
Well, absolutely. Who wants to go out of business to do stuff?
But do you seriously think, sorry to interrupt, Chris, but do you seriously think that some parts of this country won't be able to be farmed because of the limitations this freshwater plan puts on farmers or suggests?
That's our concern, as to how hard that limit or that process is to get there. Now, if we've got more tools in the toolbox that get us there, we're all trying to do the same amount with less. And we're not advocating that we want whole-scale, more intensification of cropping or vegetable growing or dairy or whatever. We're just saying we need time to transition to lower, but with the current technologies, can we still support our families and get to these environmental bottom lines that are being proposed? We're not saying water quality is a bad thing. We're just saying, is some of that water quality that's being proposed actually sustainable? Because what they've gone through, and they've made it quite clear, is there is no economic oversight has gone into any of the numbers that they've put out there. It is straight out on ecologic values. And that's a good thing, but that's when the policy comes in and says, well, okay, perhaps if you go up a little bit, everyone or most people can live within these limits.
The thing is, other industries have have pressure put on them as well. I mean, people who make single-use plastic bags probably think they've been treated harshly as well. If we want a pristine environment, then people are going to have to make sacrifices and changes, aren't they? So why do farmers think they should get, well, a bit of a pass?
Are we talking about a pass? We're talking about getting time so that we can have all the wins that we need. We want good employment, we want good rural infrastructure, we want hospitals, we want schools, we want all the neat things in life. And we've got water quality in much of New Zealand, and many places, not all, I'll get that is improving.
The Agriculture Minister says you're needlessly catastrophising this, are you?
I don't want to get into a debate with the Minister on that, but we are out there talking to farmers at the moment. There is so much uncertainty in this world. Some of it's from domestic, a lot of it's from international markets and what's going on in the world. Uncertainty. And farmers, they want to do the right thing, they want to do it once, and they want to know that the goalpost is something they can actually aspire and get to. And if there's a big brick wall in front of them and there's no steps to get up there, there's the problem. So is this the time to talk about genetic modification or GE technologies where we could have some low-end grasses or crops or whatever? Because we don't have the other tools other than destocking. And we're a food basket for many people. The food that we produce on my farm doesn't just feed my family, it feeds thousands of other people around.
So that's Chris Allen from Federated Farmers there. Let us know what you think. Are unrealistic expectations being placed on farmers? Are they being expected to achieve something in too tight a time frame? Or is it a fair call? Some of those restrictions would come in the next year, and he was saying that he thinks they would take 15 years realistically to achieve. Who's right? Text us on 2101. You can tweet us at checkpointrnz or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It's almost 19 minutes after 5. Chinese tourists involved in a fatal crash near Rotorua have described passengers dangling from their seatbelts after the bus flipped on its side. 4 adults and a young child were killed when the bus failed to make a bend in the road in wet weather yesterday on State Highway 5 near Ngātira. 22 people survived, but several were injured, with some still receiving treatment at Waikato and Rotorua hospitals today. There's been an outpouring of support for those involved from Rotorua's Chinese community, and survivors are said to be incredibly grateful for their care. Our reporter Nita Blake-Person and cameraman Nick Monroe are in Rotorua and filed this report.
For some on board the bus, this New Zealand trip was their first time out of China. They had only just begun their 12-day tour of New Zealand and Australia, arriving in Auckland on Tuesday before it was tragically cut short. Passengers spoken to by RNZ have recalled the bus brakes being slammed on before it slid out of control and flipped onto its side. One man travelling with his wife described dragging themselves from the crash before heading back to rescue two more people. One of them was stuck in their seat thanks to their seatbelt and was dangling above the ground. The harrowing experience has been deeply upsetting for some.
Apparently, they are very traumatized by the incident, and what I'm doing is try to give them as much help as I can.
China's ambassador to New Zealand, Wu Shi, was visiting patients at Waikato and Rotorua hospitals today. She says officials have been working to alert the families of 4 adults and 1 young child who were killed. And she's been supporting survivors.
What I'm doing is try to give them as much help as I can. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank the New Zealand government, the police, and the hospital and the local Chinese community. They are doing their best to help those people who are injured.
Rotorua's Chinese community has also been quick to rally to support those involved. A local Chinese restaurant arrived at the hospital today to drop off food, and others have been providing translation services as well as basics like toiletries.
They do need some help, but they're all in a very stable emotion. And when they're seeing us, because I'm come from the same hometown, same city with them, so when they hear my voice, my accent, they feel close.
Police say they are interviewing dozens of people about the crash, but any conclusions as to what caused it are some time away.
We wish that all the Chinese tourists will be safe while they are traveling in New Zealand, because tourism is a big part in China, New Zealand.
LNZ International Travel, the tour bus involved in the crash, was not available for comment. In Rotorua for Checkpoint, Nita Blakeperson.
And to overseas now, it's been another day of humiliating setbacks for the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson. First, the House of Commons voted to prevent him from taking Britain out of the European Union without a deal. Then he failed to win enough backing to hold a snap election, adding even more uncertainty and confusion as the clock ticks towards the Brexit deadline date of October 31st. The BBC's political editor, Laura Koonsberg, has this report on the day's events.
The Prime Minister is demanding a new Parliament, an election. Yes, he says he doesn't want one. The other parties say they do, but may yet stand in his way. It won't be settled until the Commons closes the door on the possibility that Boris Johnson could take us out of the EU next month without a deal.
Have you lost control, Prime Minister?
His Brexit at any cost.
Order. Questions to the Prime Minister.
But if he gets his way, this first joust of shouting in Prime Minister's questions could be his last.
Prime Minister,
can he confirm now that he will allow the people of this country to decide on what he is giving up in their name with a general election on October the 15th? Or is he frit? There's only one chlorinated chicken that I can see in this house, and he's on that bench.
He's desperate, absolutely desperate, to avoid scrutiny. And in his third day in office, after 5 questions from me, we haven't had an answer to any of them.
Ayes to the right, 327. The noes to the left, 299.
But they were successful at this stage, voting to prevent the Prime Minister taking us out of the EU in October if no deal is in place.
Shaving foam?
Now it's up to the House of Lords, though, preparing to bed down to talk and talk until it's done, racing against the deadline before Parliament shuts next week. So the main battle inside might soon be outside, if, or more likely when, a general election is finally called. This, the first official request.
There must now be an election on Tuesday, the 15th of October. And I invite the right honourable gentleman to respond, to decide which of us goes as Prime Minister to that crucial council.
Labour says not yet, not until the anti-no deal plan becomes law, but that could be in days.
I look forward to the day his government and his party and all their austerity and misery they've heaped on this country are turfed out of office. It's a cynical movement from a cynical Prime Minister.
When it came, the decision was against Number 10. Labour abstained.
The ayes to the right, 298. The noes to the left, 56.
Confident in the bunker. It's not no for good. It's a no, not yet.
Laura Koonsberg there from Westminster. And the House of Lords has now said that the bill to stop a no-deal Brexit will complete its passage through the upper house by 5 o'clock Friday evening UK time. There's been tears of shock and sadness as a man accused of murdering a Mangawhai toddler was instead convicted of manslaughter. Aria Roberts suffered an unsurvivable head injury in the care of her mother's former boyfriend, Aaron Archer, last August. The Crown said it was murder, while the defence argued it was a tragic accident. This afternoon, after deliberating for more than 2 days, the jury delivered a verdict in the High Court in Auckland. Annika Smith was there.
Aaron Archer showed no emotion as he was found not guilty of murder. Family members, divided over the case, cried in the public gallery. Most of them sat quietly, while one man crossed his arms and shook his head. Justice Futter addressed the court.
Mr Archer, you have been found guilty on one charge of manslaughter. I enter that conviction today.
Mr Archer was trusted to care for Aria Roberts while her mother popped out to the supermarket to get dinner last August. Within 15 minutes, the girl had a head injury that killed her in minutes. It was generally agreed the cause of her death was a blunt force head injury, but one of the trial's key issues was how more than 20 bruises on the girl's head could be explained. The Crown said the nature, scale and pattern meant her injuries were non-accidental. Mr Archer declined to speak to the police, as is his right, but witnesses overheard him saying he was swinging the girl around when she hit her head. His defence said an accidental knock, general toddler tumbles, and a fall into a coffee table explained the bruises. Earlier today, the jury said it couldn't reach a unanimous verdict. Justice Futter said they could try for a majority one, where 11 of the 12 jurors agreed.
In terms of a majority verdict, if only one of your number is in disagreement, then you may proceed to verdict. If you do not have 11 people agreeing, you are not yet in a position to give a verdict.
Half an hour later, they returned with their majority verdict, not guilty of murder, but guilty of the alternative charge of manslaughter. The result means the jury found Mr Archer responsible for Aria's death, but that he didn't have murderous intent or reckless disregard for her life. After the verdict was delivered, Justice Futter thanked the jurors for their service.
Madam Foreperson, members of the jury, I want to thank you for the hard work you have clearly put in relation to this matter. It has been, I have no doubt, a difficult task for you, and you are to be commended for the effort that you have put into reaching your verdicts.
The one-year anniversary of Aria's death fell on the 4th day of the trial. Aria wasn't the first child her mother lost. She was a twin, but her baby brother died in childbirth. Mr Archer will be sentenced on the 21st of October. Ātui te ko te matua ko Annika Smith aho.
And coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, US travellers are warned about New Zealand measles threat as the number of cases tops 1,000. A Māori man is turned away from a Melbourne restaurant because of his full face moko, and an emotional Ryan Crotty is back in the All Blacks. Do get in touch about anything you've heard on the program today, particularly interested in your thoughts on the fresh water policy that's been announced. You can get in touch via text 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. You can Facebook us, Checkpoint, or email us, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Here's Susanna now with the headlines.
Tears were heard in the public gallery of the High Court in Auckland this afternoon as a man accused of murdering a toddler was found guilty of manslaughter instead. The jury took 15 hours to reach its verdict. 2-year-old Aria Roberts sustained an unsurvivable head injury while in the care of Aaron Archer in their Mangawhai home a year ago. The defence said he was swinging her around when she accidentally hit her head, while the Crown had argued he deliberately assaulted her. A survivor of yesterday's deadly bus crash near Rotorua says the bus swayed violently from side to side before flipping over. A young child and 4 adults were killed when the bus crashed at Ngātira on State Highway 5. 27 Chinese tourists were on board when the bus rolled off the road. Cabinet ministers have dismissed concerns from federated farmers about new freshwater standards as ridiculous and absurd. The farmers group says proposals to improve freshwater quality could jeopardise food production and have untold ramifications for the economy. Agriculture Minister Damien O'Connor says the objections are ridiculous as they have already happened on some farms. And the Environment Minister David Parker has pointed out that some members of the panel making recommendations had dairy backgrounds. Hurricane Dorian has strengthened back into a Category 3 storm as it continues to approach the South Carolina coast. Earlier in the week it made landfall in the Bahamas, causing catastrophic damage and killing at least 20 people. It's expected to come close to the South Carolina coast in the next 12 hours. Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam says China understands and supports her move to formally withdraw an extradition bill, part of measures that she hopes will help the city move forward from months of unrest. Ms Lam says the full withdrawal of the bill is a decision made by her government with Beijing's backing. She also announced other measures, including more dialogue to address other deep-rooted economic, social and political problems that she says have contributed to the current impasse. Those are the latest news headlines from RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. If you're just tuning in, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. It's time for business news now with Nona Peltier. She's joined me in the studio in Auckland. Nona, we talked about, in the past, industrial property sector. They're the ones who are doing quite well.
Yes, and that's partly because it's a pretty low maintenance type of thing. I mean, if you're a landlord of an industrial property, there's not a lot of bells and whistles there, are there? So you can just basically, it's a building, warehousing, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and so overseas investors are interested and there's been a deal?
Yeah, so a company that has a reasonably large portfolio of industrial property is a company called Stride. So they had about 200 million. They've acquired more properties. They've built it up to about 360 million. And they've got now a joint venture partner in the by way of JP Morgan Asset Management, which is a really big international organization. What they're going to do is bring international investors here, and they're going to grow that, so the size of that portfolio, which they're now calling a fund, to something like about 550 million over the next couple of years. And so JP Morgan, they're going to bring in some investment. So Stride's going to own about 70%, and JP Morgan's going to own 30%. And overall, the deal is going to be worth about another 185 million in terms of an investment. Now, that's going to bring international investors here. I mean, obviously, that's where they're hoping to go. That's just an opening, though. That's 360, looking for 550, and then more after that.
Interesting. Okay, cyber attacks. We hear a lot about this and the cost of them. How expensive are they running to?
They're moving. Well, this is reported, of course, because a lot of times people don't report losses, but they're becoming more likely to report these days. So reported financial losses were $6.5 million in the 3-month period ended in June. Now, that's almost a 4-fold increase from what was at the beginning of the year, which was 1.7 million. So it's a big increase in the amount of damages caused by cyber attacks. And now, most of the time, it's not what you would think. It's really just the good nature of people that's being exploited. It's less technology, much more behavioral. So in other words, it can be addressed, and it's simply by using a lot of common sense and perhaps not being as trusting when somebody, when you get a bill presented by an email, not just paying it automatically.
You're saying it's largely people getting sucked in?
Yes, that's right, Lisa. People being sucked in, if that's one way of putting it. Now, the MB has a website via their CERT, which is the Computer Emergency Response Team, have a website, and it's CERT for short.
Right.
And if you go to their website, they have all sorts of tips and ways that you can get around this. But it's important to know that it's not really a high-tech wizardry that's at your business. It's really those kinds of things. And there wasn't like one big attack. This is across the board. And of course, there's other kinds of losses too. There's data loss, there's loss of reputation, operational loss. So there's a number of ways that cyber attacks can hurt your business or yourself personally. And there is a lot of information there on how to safeguard yourself. You might as well give it a go.
News you can use, Nona.
News you can use.
And what's been happening on the market today?
Really, actually quite a good day on the market all around, and that's partly because the trade talks are back on the cards, Lisa. Yes, indeed. It looks like the China and the United States negotiators are going to come back to the table and talk trade, and that really made the market feel quite I don't want to say bullish, but I'll tell you what, it certainly left a good taste in the mouth, so to speak. So the NZX Top 50 Index, it rose in line with other markets to another record close, 99 points up. That's 0.9%, almost a whole percent. And 107. I've never said that before. 11,107 was the close, so well above 11,000 there. And the dollar, it really also perked up, as well as the Australian did as well. 63.7 US cents, 93.5 Australian, and 52 British pence.
Thanks, Nona. Nona Peltier with our business news. It's estimated up to 70,000 people in the Bahamas are in need of immediate humanitarian relief in the wake of Hurricane Dorian. The powerful storm caused catastrophic damage on Great Abaco Island and Grand Bahama. Now, the death toll has risen to 20, but it is expected to climb significantly as rescuers arrive and search for people among the wreckage. The BBC's Ali Makbul flew over the islands where the true scale of the devastation is only now being assessed.
With the hurricane finally moving off the Bahamas after many terrifying days, the devastation can be assessed for the first time, and it is shocking. Marsh Harbour on the low-lying Abaco Islands has been obliterated. Massive storm surges would have overwhelmed this entire area. The airport won't be accessible for days, and other parts of this island chain are still too dangerous to get anywhere near.
We can confirm now 7 deaths, but we know that given the extent of the devastation, that there will be more to come. You just can't endure or go through a devastation like this with that minimal deaths, unfortunately.
We're on the north side of the storm now.
The International Space Station captured dramatic images of Hurricane Dorian now swirling in the ocean close to Florida. Well, with this hurricane, after many days now just about moving off the northern Bahamas, it means some areas at least have safe enough skies that aircraft can take to them, and for the first time finally assess the devastation that's been caused. But it is Abaco and Grand Bahama that have borne the brunt of the storm's ire, and where in the coming days the humanitarian needs are going to be acute.
Ali Makbul reporting there from the Bahamas. Meanwhile, the hurricane, which is now a Category 3, is heading towards South Carolina, and record storm surges and major flooding are predicted for coastal communities in several states. Hong Kong's leader Carrie Lam has announced that a controversial extradition bill will be formally withdrawn, but it may be a case of too little, too late. The bill has sparked months of pro-democracy protests, which have plunged the former British colony into its deepest crisis in decades. Protesters say the demonstrations will continue until other demands are met, including direct elections. From Hong Kong, here's the ABC's Eliza Borrello.
News the extradition bill was formally being sent to the dustbin spread quickly on the streets of Hong Kong last night.
Have you heard the news that Carrie Lam has withdrawn the bill?
Yes.
And what do you make of that?
I don't accept that because our request is much more than that, right?
Should the protest continue?
If the government is not doing anything, I think it should be. It should be continuing.
The destruction to the economy of Hong Kong is very bad. I think they need to be responsible.
Within hours, the all too familiar sounds of these protests were again echoing around the city. This recording was made outside the Mongkok police station. When Hong Kong was handed back to China from Britain in 1997, it was granted a legal system separate from the mainland's. But the extradition bill would have allowed Hong Kongers to be sent to mainland China to face trial. It has triggered 13 weeks of unrest, which Carrie Lam, Hong Kong's chief executive, cited when she announced the bill would be torn up in a televised address.
Fellow citizens, for more than 2 months, protests arising from the Fugitive Offenders Bill have continued. Visitors wonder whether our city is still a safe place for travel or business.
The demonstrators say they're leaderless, but Joshua Wong, a 22-year-old activist, is one of the key faces of the protest campaign.
With the power of people, finally, we successfully to force government get awareness. It's time respect on our voice. We are not satisfying with Hong Kong government just withdraw the bill. The protest will continue until the day we have free election.
Increased political freedom from China is one of 4 demands the protesters have made of Ms Lam's government that is yet to be met. Others include an inquiry into alleged police brutality, which she isn't entertaining.
The government believes that matters relating to police enforcement actions are best handled by the existing and well-established Independent Police Complaints Council.
Overall, there's a big sense of mistrust between the protesters and Carrie Lam's government, who activist Joshua Wong sees as doing the bidding of Beijing.
Our protest must continue at least until 1st of October, the China's National Day.
On the 1st of October, China plans to mark 70 years since Chairman Mao founded modern China, an occasion it will now celebrate with the eyes of the world firmly watching.
Eliza Borrello in Hong Kong. It is about 20 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Beauden Barrett is back at first 5 and Ben Smith is back at fullback for the All Blacks, while one veteran's return has him emotional ahead of his last test on New Zealand soil. Coach Steve Hansen has made several changes to the side for Saturday's Rugby World Cup warm-up match against Tonga in Hamilton, and midfielder Ryan Crotty, who's headed overseas at the end of the season, is determined to make the most of his chances. Rugby reporter Joe Porter has more.
Away to Crotty, comes back in field, Ryan Crotty!
Ryan Crotty hasn't been sighted in an All Blacks jersey this year after breaking his thumb during Super Rugby, but he's back at second 5 for Saturday's test.
Last test match in New Zealand for a lot of guys, put on the black jersey here, so you never make it about the individual, but it's pretty special for a lot of guys.
Though it will be particularly special for 30-year-old Crotty, who's been reflecting on a professional career that spanned more than a decade.
I've had a lot of special moments the last few months. My family will be coming up, so yeah, it means a lot. This team's, you play for the All Blacks, you see what it means to a lot of other people for your success. So I'm looking forward to getting a bit emotional talking about it. It's a massive game for me, and I'm really excited for it.
Crotty is playing inside 24-year-old Anton Leonard-Brown, who he believes has been one of the All Blacks' standout performers.
He's just taken his game to another level. He's just continually getting a little bit better each year, and it's just awesome to see him on that incline. And I love how mindful, he's almost wise beyond his years. He's still a young guy, but he's had a lot of experience, and he's a deep thinker.
However, Leonard-Brown was quick to brush off the compliment.
He's after a free lunch. I've got the wrong person, haven't I? No, yeah, I guess I am. A lot of times the boys catch me just staring into the sky because I'm thinking of something deeply.
One thing to not read too deeply into is this All Blacks team. Yes, Beauden Barrett is back at first 5 and Ben Smith fullback. However, regular 10 Richie Mo'unga, flanker Sam Cane, midfielders Jack Goodhue and Sonny Bill Williams and wing Rico Ioane all have niggles and have been rested. Smith, though, needs to find some form and find it fast if he's to be a regular feature at the World Cup. Hansen is confident the man they call Bender will turn things around.
The problem he's lost is his own inner self-belief and his confidence, and maybe that's because of the injury, maybe because everyone's talking about him leaving and he's got caught up in that, and he's just got to go out and trust that he's got good instincts, he's a good rugby player. I think we'll see a pretty good performance from him.
And Hansen believes Smith will still have a significant impact on the World Cup.
Great players will always go through a little bit of adversity and they always bounce back. I mean, Dan Carter was a classic example. Struggled 215 to the point where everyone wanted him to be dropped except us and him. And, the France game, things just clicked and bingo, rest is history.
History would suggest the All Blacks will put 50 points on Tonga, but with Hamilton set to be flooded by a sea of red supporters on Saturday, Hansen knows they'll also have to take the passionate Ikalia Tahi fans out of the game.
We expect them to be really excited, hungry. They're going to have a massive fan base by the sound of it, a stream of red, so our job will be to quieten the noise down in the stands and quieten the noise down on the park. It's about taking the game to them and rather than sitting and waiting for them to take it to us.
The All Blacks will want to take it to Tonga with a performance that puts their rivals on notice just 2 weeks out from the World Cup. In Hamilton, mō te hōtaka o te ahi pōnei, ko Joe Porter aho.
An assisted home ownership scheme under Kiwi Build is unlikely to benefit low-income families, according to official advice. That's despite the government claiming otherwise. The renovated, relaunched Kiwi Build includes $400 million ring-fenced for a progressive home ownership scheme. That includes what the Housing Minister has described as low-income New Zealanders. But Ministry advice made public today concludes a shared equity scheme would likely only benefit what it calls moderate earners. Those households on $80,000 to $97,000, not families, quote, further down the income spectrum. So we invited Housing Minister Megan Woods back on the program to clarify just who is being targeted with this initiative.
That's where we're working through the design details, what that mix looks like, and why when I announced it yesterday, the $400 million, and I said it could help between 2,500 to 4,000 people. That's why there is such a large range, because we're working through with the organisations that are doing it at the moment exactly where we'll fit in there, how we can help the most people, how we can help people that wouldn't otherwise get into home ownership. So all those design details are exactly the kinds of things that I'm working up now and will come back with by the end of the year.
Right. Last night you told me that you considered low income to be people earning under the median income. I'm assuming you mean median household income, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So the thing is, the documents released today about the proposed schemes, they say that they're not suitable, shared equity schemes are not suitable for low income earners, that they're more middle income earners.
Yeah, so it's around the median income that I was talking about. I did use the example of where we do have an example where Habitat for Humanity can go down to people earning 60%, but that's right at the bottom end of the scale. So what we know that the schemes are out there, Habitat for Humanity target households 60 to 7, with some as low as kind of getting into 50 and even the high 40s when they're going to 60% of the median income. But we see that the Housing Foundation is 65 to 95,000. So the
but you said below median household income, Minister. Sorry to interrupt, but I just want to get specific here. You said below the median household income was what you considered to be low income. The advice that's been given to you is saying that those schemes are best suited to people who are making between $80,000 and $97,000. Do you consider that to be low income?
Well, look, the other advice I've got is the time that I've spent listening and talking to the people that have these schemes working on the ground. People like a Housing Foundation and Habitat for Humanity, and they are helping people on $65,000, $60,000, $70,000, which is around the median household income, which is what I was talking about yesterday. But what I also said yesterday is that this is all the design detail that we're working on at the moment, that we have to look at what the spread of that looks like. The further down the income levels that you push, obviously you need to put more wraparound support around those families, and more equity has to go into those families. If you're working at 90%, people that can afford 90% of a mortgage, obviously you put less in, but these people are earning more. So that is exactly why we are taking the time to get the design of this right.
Okay, but I want to be clear
to those that are operating these now.
I want to be clear about what you consider to be low income. So the advice to you is that these schemes are best suited to households earning $80,000 to $97,000. Now, that's way above the median income in some cases. So what do you consider to be low income?
Well, that's a question you asked me, and I said you asked me yesterday, and I said I considered low income to be below the median income.
Right. So then the difficulty you have is all the advice that I can see that you've released today says that at that level, the scheme doesn't work best. It works better for middle income people. So will this shared ownership scheme be another middle class housing scheme?
No, and this is why we're working very closely with organisations like Habitat for Humanity and the Housing Foundation, people that are out there doing this at the moment. It's not theoretical. They've got schemes that are operating at this level, and why we're seeing how it is that actually we can push further to the median income and below for some people to help them as well. Because these are people that are currently excluded from home ownership. And when we look at Habitat for Humanity, that they're working with people very much around that median income and below, and they have a 92% completion rate of families that are in that scheme, but there is a lot of wraparound support that goes with it.
Yeah, so there are other factors involved in that, because again, the advice given to you was that housing providers that you approached about shared ownership schemes told the government that Kiwi build houses were too expensive to make that kind of scheme work. So are you going to reduce the costs of Kiwi builds? I mean, how low can you go?
Well, when you look at a scheme like Habitat for Humanity, part of it is actually sweat equity that goes into it as well, that the people that move into the house actually help with the build of it. So there is ways of reducing the cost as well. But Lisa, we can't get ahead of ourselves here, because this is exactly the conversations that we're having. That is initial advice that was released. We're working very closely with the organisations that are currently successfully doing this. So having conversations around exactly what income point is premature. That is the work we're doing, and we know what is working on the ground with these organisations.
The reason I want to explore this is because all the advice that seems to be given to you that has been released suggests that, you're flying in the face of that advice by saying that this will help low-income families into houses. So, I mean, how realistic is this?
Oh, look, absolutely realistic, because it's happening at the moment. We have organisations out there that are doing it. We have the Housing Foundation that are working with people with a household income between 65 and 95,000.
With less costly houses than Kiwi build properties.
Yeah, and look, no one ever said these were all going to be Kiwi built properties. That was not part of it. I mean, in some parts of New Zealand, this will be about existing housing stock. There will be parts of New Zealand where it doesn't make sense to build a house, because actually there's houses on the market that are more affordable than you can build a new house for. So there's a range of factors that have to be taken into account, and I think it's really important not to get ahead of this, because we have said that we have to do exactly this kind of design work. It's going to look different in different parts of the country.
So another thing that was said in the advice is if you wish to go lower on the income spectrum, that is get low-income families into these kinds of arrangements, it is going to be at a much higher cost to the Crown. So is $400 million enough to make this work?
Well, one of the interesting things that the conversation that we had with Habitat for Humanity, that are working right down to 60% of median income, that even at that level they have a 10-year recycle rate on that work. So they put a family into a home, it's a rent-to-own scheme, they work intensively with them, it's about getting them budget ready, it's doing that, but the money can be recycled in 10 years. So yes, I do have confidence that we can have a spread of people that are helped through this, and that it all fits within the envelope of $400 million.
And that's the Housing Minister, Megan Woods. I'm interested to hear from you. What do you consider to be low income? Who would you like to be helped into home ownership through this progressive home ownership scheme? What kind of level of income should households have in order to be eligible? That advice to government says that those schemes are best suited to $80,000 to $97,000 incomes. Is that low income to you? Text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. rnz.co.nz. It is about 7 minutes away from 6. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. A Māori man has been turned away from a Melbourne restaurant because of his full-face moko. Touch rugby coach Gary Harding from Ngāti Porou booked a table at Village Bell for a thank you dinner for another coach who had flown over from New Zealand to give some training sessions. But as he told our reporter Mediana Johnson, he was turned away at the door on Saturday.
I was walking in with the crowd and took my beanie off as a sign of respect to walk in, and was stopped by the bouncer there and just was told that he wouldn't let me in with that on, and I was kind of stumped and didn't really understand what he was talking about. You know, I was holding my forte in my hand and it was like, oh, what do you mean? And he quickly says, oh, I can't let you in with all those facial tattoos all over your face. And again, I was pretty shocked by his response. And says, oh, are you for real, mate? And he was like, yeah, it's not a good look. We've got a strict policy around facial tattoos. And I was about to have a conversation with him about, well, there's a difference between cultural markings or cultural tāmoho than just the average facial tattoo. But he was quite arrogant and didn't want to enter into any discussion about it. And basically just says, oh, no, it's not a good look. And by that time, I turned around to my partner and the crew that we were with and just said, oh, look, if that's the case, I don't want to be here. And so we went to walk away, and, you know, that's when the snarky, arrogant sort of comment came about. As we were leaving, he mentioned, oh, well, you must get that all the time. This wouldn't be the first time. So I sort of quickly turned around and said, well, actually, mate, this is the first time. It's the first time ever this has happened. I've travelled around the world and I've never had this happen to me. But then my partner pulled me away and we just left, and we went down to another restaurant down the road where they were very busy, but they allowed us in with our big crew and accommodated us very well. And the kai there was beautiful, so it was a blessing in disguise, I suppose.
Have you laid, following this incident, a complaint with Village Bell?
So what I originally did is I put a review up on their page just to say, you know, not impressed by the arrogance of this bouncer and your guys' stance, but I thought they might have contacted me to, you know, have a discussion about the incident that happened, and that would have been the opportunity where we could have righted the wrongs and been a chance to educate them on, you know, cultural appropriation. But, you know, they're not taking any calls. They not even trying to get in touch with me or anything. So
yeah, you tried to call them a couple of times, and
yeah, I have, but they don't want to speak to us. And again, you know, like, a lot of people have tried to contact me since the incident with the media and stuff, and not once have they tried to contact me to sort of understand what happened.
Gary Harding speaking to our reporter Mediana Johnson, and he says despite contacting the restaurant multiple times about the incident, they have not responded. The Village Bell has not responded to RNZ's request for comment either. Right, so often we hear stories about animals which are full of doom and gloom, with threatened species and those on the brink of extinction, while one zoo in central France has been trying to do its bit to address the problem. It's paid off, with Beauval Zoo experiencing somewhat of a baby boom. The BBC's Tim Allman went along for a look.
You have to hand it to the animals round here. They're doing their bit.
Love is in the air, everywhere I look around.
The latest addition is as yet unnamed Indian rhino, spending some quality time with her mum. But she is only one of a glut of babies that have appeared in the last few months. There was Dastan, the Persian panther, and Kimia, the first giraffe ever born in this zoo.
Beauval, c'est à peu près 10 000 animaux, c'est plus de 600 espèces.
Beauval Zoo contains about 10,000 animals, more than 600 species, with more than 700 births each year. From the smallest frog to the giraffe, the rhino, the giant panda, the koala or the gorilla.
It's not just a recent phenomenon. Yuan Meng, the first giant panda cub in France, recently celebrated his second birthday. Visitor numbers are soaring as people want to celebrate the pitter-patter of tiny paws.
Sinon, j'aime tous les animaux. I love all animals, all of them, and I especially enjoy when there are births.
seeing babies and seeing them evolve over time.
Qui s'en occupent bien d'ailleurs, la preuve, il y en a beaucoup.
Some of the animals here are being reintroduced to the wild. 2 gorillas were recently sent to a reserve in Gabon. The zookeepers insisting they can play a small part in the preservation of the species and the planet.
And that was Tim Allman there from Beauval Zoo in France. Let's go to some of your feedback now on our earlier stories on the fresh water proposals released today. This one in from Cam. Perhaps federated farmers can tell us why farmers should continue to be able to make a personal gain from polluting our environment. If they can't farm cleanly, then they should not farm at all. It's not the job of New Zealanders to prop up dirty businesses, farmers or anyone else. This one, and also the farmers won't win this one. Every Kiwi hates our dirty rivers. Others of you have got in contact too. This one says the Federated Farmers rep sounded like a whinging toddler. Any industry that soils our environment should clean it up. They dirtied the rivers, and rather than taking responsibility, he was crying about being asked to clean up the mess, and worse, making threats that the cost of food will go up if they are forced to. But on the other side of the coin, some of you in the farming industry have got in contact. This one says we have over 10 kilometres of drains on our farms that we have fenced despite not being required to. We are not cattle farmers. If we have to have a 5-metre riparian setback for these fences as proposed, we will have to re-fence the lot, and then we won't be able to clean these drains as required by regulations. This is the sort of nonsense you get when government excludes farmers from the discussion. And another one saying, I'm not a cow farmer but sat down with a consultant to work on farm consenting. Its estimated cost $18,000. That's $18,000 I can't spend on fencing creeks, planting natives, etc.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leata tēnei. Federated Farmers says the most draconian of the government's proposals for restoring the quality of the nation's waterways would effectively close the farm gate in some regions. If the plan unveiled by the Environment and Agriculture Ministers today is adopted, there will be strict limits on changes to land use and tougher standards for nitrate levels. Federated Farmers Water spokesperson Chris Allen says farmers support the drive to improve and maintain water quality, but many will feel that some of today's proposals are unachievable. He told Checkpoint reducing nitrogen levels by as much as 80% in some areas could change the face of New Zealand.
The only way you can achieve those sort of outcomes is either taking all farming activities off the land and throwing in pine trees if you're lucky, I think.
Chris Allen. However, the Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says Federated Farmers' response is at odds with what others in the rural sector have been saying.
I don't think that everyone is of the same view of federated farmers. Keeping in mind, of course, when we developed these proposals, we used and talked openly with those from the rural sector, from processors, to make sure that we were working alongside the rural community.
Jacinda Ardern. Nationals Agriculture spokesperson Todd Muller says the plan is a gut punch to the rural community and ignores the good work farmers are already doing. The man accused of murdering a Northland toddler has been acquitted and found guilty of manslaughter instead. The jury in the High Court in Auckland returned its verdict this afternoon after deliberating for nearly 2 days. Annika Smith reports.
2-year-old Aria Roberts sustained an unsurvivable head injury while in the care of Aaron Archer in their Mangawhai home a year ago. The defence said he was swinging her around when she accidentally hit her head, while the Crown said he deliberately assaulted her. After deliberating since Tuesday afternoon, the jury were given leave at 2 o'clock today to reach a majority verdict, which can be reached if 11 of the 12 jurors agree. Half an hour later, a majority verdict of manslaughter was delivered. Archer will be sentenced on October the 21st. Ātui te kōti matua ko Annika Smith aho.
China's ambassador Wu Xi says she is trying to visit all the Chinese tourists injured in yesterday's deadly bus crash west of Rotorua. 5 passengers, 4 adults and a child, were killed when the bus rolled on State Highway 5. Speaking to media in Rotorua this afternoon, Ms Wu said many of the surviving 22 passengers are traumatised.
I had a brief discussion with the tour company, and the tour company is doing their best to help the victims and also the poor people who are also injured.
China's ambassador Wu Xi. The police are working with embassy officials to formally identify those killed and contact their next of kin in China. A soggy August has lifted Auckland's water storage to 80% of capacity, easing pressure on the city's supply. The dams in Waitakere and Hunua Ranges got as much rainfall in the 6 weeks to the end of August as they did in the first 6 months of the year. More on this from Jordan Bond.
At the start of July, the amount of water stored was only 59% of total capacity. That prompted Watercare and the Mayor, Phil Goff, to ask residents to use less water, fearing the supply would not build up enough to ensure a problem-free summer. Use dropped by 2.5%, and now, after a rainy 6 weeks, levels are okay. The dams are still 10% below the historical average for this time of year, but Watercare says it's comfortable with that, considering showers are forecast for the next 10 days. This is Jordan Bond.
The Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam says China understands, respects and supports her government's move to formally withdraw the extradition bill that triggered 3 months of mass protest. At a media conference today, Ms Lam said the full withdrawal of the bill yesterday was a decision made by her government with Beijing's backing. However, she skirted around the reason why it took her so long to withdraw it. The official China Daily says the move is an olive branch that leaves demonstrators with no excuse for continuing violence. Bangladesh has banned the operations of 2 non-governmental organisations, accusing them of encouraging Rohingya refugees not to return to Myanmar. The government was embarrassed last month when the refugees refused to take part in a planned repatriation, saying conditions in Myanmar are too dangerous. The BBC's Anbarasan Ethirajan reports.
The US-based Adventist Development and Relief Agency and Al-Markazul Islami, which is a local body, have been ordered to immediately stop their work across Bangladesh. The government has already prevented several NGOs from working at the camps, accusing them of wrongdoings. More than 1 million Rohingya Muslim refugees live in the Cox's Bazar district. Bangladesh and Myanmar have agreed to repatriate them, but the refugees are refusing to go back, saying conditions are not right. Last month, they organized a massive rally outside one of the camps to mark the 2nd anniversary of their exodus from Myanmar.
That report from Anbarasan Ethirajan. A Taranaki iwi says it's excited about the opportunities that will come from new funding for the area. The government is putting $19 million into expanding and improving walking tracks and huts around Mount Taranaki. A new walk will also be created from Dawson's Falls to the end of Mangore Road at the base of the Po Akai Ranges. An extra 40,000 visitors are expected as a result. The chief executive of Te Runanga o Ngati Ruanui, Deborah Ngarewa Peka, says it's a great opportunity for the area.
It's really exciting. I mean, this is a critical part of who we are, obviously, as Ngati Ruanui with the Maunga connection, but also it's a great opportunity to showcase the authentic stories and experiences of Taranaki. So that's great news.
Debbie Ngarewa Peka of Ngati Ruanui. At 6:06, the Tall Blacks forward Finn Delaney insists the pressure is on Greece, not New Zealand, ahead of tonight's Basketball World Cup showdown in China. Both teams must win to qualify for the second round. Greece, who are one of the tournament favourites, were upset 79-78 by Brazil earlier this week. And Delaney says that result makes New Zealand's situation simple.
Our fate's in our hands, and that's the way we want it. We control what's going to happen next, so everyone's excited. We've got a huge opportunity on our hands with no pressure, just the opportunity to go play basketball and win the basketball.
The match starts at midnight. The New Zealand eventer Tim Price concedes he might be a little bit mad competing with 3 horses at the Burleigh Horse Trials starting tonight. The defending champion is again riding his top mount, Ringwood Skyboy, but he'll also be up on Bango and Xavier Fair.
They're all quite experienced now. They've been around probably between them, I guess, 6 or 7 times at this level. So the preparation's slightly different at that stage where you just do minimal competitions with them. They've all gone well, and then the fitness work, I don't think that any of them have missed a gallop or anything like that.
Tim Price is one of 5 New Zealanders competing at Burleigh. Rafa Nadal has ground out a straight sets win to advance to the US Tennis Open semi-finals in New York. He beat Argentina's Diego Schwartzman 6-4, 7-5, 6-2 to stay in the hunt for his 4th US Open trophy. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Alison Ballance investigates when blue-green algae goes bad. Well, toxic, really. There's a window on the world of policing in Rio de Janeiro. Shoot first, then you don't have to ask questions. And we have a new cultural ambassador, architect Rebecca Kittle, who will kick things off with a discussion of our third spaces, assuming home is 1 and work is 2, on nights, which could be space number 4. Afternoon news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to North Taranaki, including Taumaranui, Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty and Taupo. Showers, some heavy, possibly thundery, clearing Bay of Plenty and Taupo tomorrow evening. Southwesterly gales in exposed places north of Waikato. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, cloudy with scattered showers, some heavy inland. Rain tomorrow, possibly heavy in the north, easing at night. South Taranaki to Wellington, also Taihape and Wairarapa. Periods of rain, low cloud from Hawke's Bay to Wellington, clearing tomorrow. Marlborough, Nelson and Buller, scattered rain, clearing from the east tomorrow evening. Westland and Fiordland, fine apart from isolated showers in Westland tonight. Canterbury, occasional rain or drizzle, turning to showers later tomorrow. Otago and Southland, fine spells and isolated showers tonight. Cloudy periods and showers increasing tomorrow. Chatham Islands, rain with low cloud, nor'easterly gales, easing by early tomorrow morning. RNZ National, it's 9 minutes past 6.
Thank you, Susanna. And if you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Farmers say the most draconian of the government's proposals to restore the quality of the nation's waterways would effectively close the farm gate in some regions. Under the proposals, there would be tighter restrictions on intensification, meaning farmers would need to prove that intensification wouldn't add to pollution. All farms would need to have management plans addressing water quality. Some could face nitrate caps, meaning they would need to take immediate action to reduce excessive leaching. The government's also proposing extensive fencing requirements and standards around winter grazing. Our reporter Robin Martin has more.
Federated Farmers says while not unexpected, today's announcement has thrown a bomb under the industry. Its National Water spokesman, Chris Allen, says in particular a proposal to reduce nitrogen levels by as much as 80% in some areas could change the face of New Zealand.
Farming's an essential part of New Zealand's economy. So many people are touched by food production, and in the document there's large parts of New Zealand, Canterbury, Waikato, Southland, where they're saying massive reductions in in-loss is going to be required. So it is effectively shutting the door on agriculture.
Mr Allen says farmers have been thrown a hospital pass.
We all want good water quality, that's why farmers have been working towards it. Give us a problem and we try and solve it. But the problem's got to be solvable, not just like a mountain or a cliff that we just can't get over. And we just can't quite see the steps on this one as to how we get there.
Taranaki dairy farmer Donald McIntyre says a one-size-fits-all approach doesn't work.
What we're doing in Taranaki on a voluntary basis will become mandatory, and I'm not comfortable about that because I don't know that success comes from putting rules in place when we've already seen a very high level of acceptance, from voluntary input and the regulations that we have in place at the moment.
Mr McIntyre says Environment Minister David Parker may find his plan backfires on him.
Mr Parker's never shied away from trying to confront farmers, and he doesn't consult farmers. So I think trying to negotiate a way forward may be a challenge. And if he doesn't want to negotiate, then that may lead to confrontation. Which, like I say, I think with the mood of the farmers out there at the moment, that's quite on the cards.
But the Chief Executive of Fish and Game, Martin Taylor, says farmers can't have it both ways.
Federated Farmers is completely out of touch and they're speaking out of both sides of their mouth. Last month down in Southland they were in the Environment Court giving evidence saying that something needed to change, and now they're putting out press releases saying it's the end of the world. They know something's got to change.
Mr Taylor puts the blame for the nation's water woes firmly at the feet of regional councils.
The reason why we have to have these freshwater reforms is because they haven't carried out their obligations under the RMA and protect the environment for future generations. If we let the industry look after themselves as they have done in the last 20 years, then we're going to get the same thing. So it's got to be government regulation. We can't have more self-regulation from industry.
That doesn't sit well with Doug Leader from Local Government New Zealand.
To blame regional councils for this position, I think, is a bit of a cheap shot.
The reality here is that the existing legislation under which regional councils have to operate under the Resource Management Act have not been conducive to fast-tracking some of these issues and remediating some waterways.
Mr. Leader says the answers to rural water issues rest with those who know the lie of the land.
The people who are best able to address issues in their specific catchments are those behind the farm gates in those catchments. They know the area the best, and this thing shouldn't be driven on a national basis. Keep it local, leave it up to the regional councils in the specific areas to engage with their communities.
The government is seeking feedback on the proposals, which include about $230 million to help farmers with the transition. It will make final decisions on its national statement for freshwater management and national environmental standards for fresh water by early next year. Mo te hōtaka o te ahi ponei, ko Robin Martinaho.
The 5 Chinese tourists who were killed in a bus crash near Rotorua yesterday had only just begun their holiday in New Zealand. 27 people were on board the bus when it crashed on State Highway 5 yesterday. The victims, who included a young child, were on day 1 of a 12-day trip to New Zealand and Australia. Reporter Chen Liu is in Rotorua and filed this report.
Smashed glass and metal can still be seen at the point where the bus crashed yesterday morning. One survivor was a retired woman who had been traveling with 6 friends. She says the group just stopped for a toilet break before the crash. Her words have been translated.
The bus started to sway side to side very violently. It all happened very quickly, and then it lost control and slipped off the road and flipped over.
She says she and all her friends were wearing seatbelts at the time of the crash. They had left China just 3 days ago for holiday, and the survivor says the tour was scheduled to leave New Zealand tomorrow.
I am very shocked by what has happened. I'm thinking about going home back to China earlier.
At the Rotorua hospital, where a number of patients have been treated, local Chinese people are offering whatever help they can, dropping food off, translating, or simply being there to chat in their native language. The chairman of the Rotorua Chinese Association, Robert Liu, says they will continue supporting the tourists.
Rotorua Chinese community does do the fantastic job. We got about 10 volunteer help yesterday for translator, look after all the injured families.
The mayor of Rotorua, Steve Chadwick, says she has been pleased to see the response during a tragic time.
Look at everybody's support. It's very heartfelt. I was amazed as the mayor last night, the number of people that rang me to say we've got space in our home, they can come and stay here, we'll look after them. And I thought that was lovely.
Shi, the Chinese ambassador to New Zealand, has visited patients at Rotorua Hospital after seeing others in Hamilton.
Apparently, they are very traumatized by the incident, and what I'm doing is try to give them as much help as I can. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank the New Zealand government, the police, and the hospital, and the local Chinese community. They are doing their best to help those people who are injured.
Ms. Wu says she also talked to the tour company and says it's trying its best to help the tourists. She says the Chinese consulate is in touch with their families in China. A police investigation is continuing. I Rotorua, mo te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko te leo aho.
It's almost 17 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. The American government is warning its citizens about New Zealand's measles outbreak as the number of cases tops 1,000. More than 50 cases in Auckland have been confirmed in the past 24 hours. The total in the region now 877. Cases across the country are continuing to pop up too, with 7 cases confirmed in Queenstown. Health experts say it's heartbreaking it's got to this point. Katie Scotcher reports.
The US Centre for Disease Control is telling Americans to get vaccinated before heading to New Zealand, and those already living here have been told the same. And as the number of cases continue to rise, vaccinologist Helen Pertusis-Harris says the situation is deeply concerning.
We're now at a point where we've got about half the number of cases as we had in the 1997 epidemic, which was our last significant measles event.
Dr. Pertusis-Harris says it's sad it's taken an outbreak for people to get vaccinated.
We know that measles can be fatal, and people are working pretty hard at keeping some people alive.
The principal of Manurewa's Rowandale School, Carl Vaso, says the school had a big measles scare a few weeks ago. At the time, about 25 staff were stuck at home in quarantine. He says the school situation has improved significantly, but some families are still choosing to keep their children at home out of fear they'll infect younger siblings. Mr. Vaso says it took a scare for parents to get their children vaccinated.
We've seen a lot of parents engage in some informed decision making. So our parents have become educated on the effects of measles and how to prevent and how to monitor and how to quarantine them if needed. But for us at Rowandale School, we're in a much better place.
Nikki Turner from the University of Auckland describes the outbreak as heartbreaking but predictable. She says the most important thing now is for children and young people to get immunised.
You give a dose from a year of age, and at least one dose is highly likely to give you a strong amount of protection.
The Ministry of Health is advising anyone with early symptoms of measles, such as a fever, cough or runny nose, to avoid Auckland, while Auckland Regional Public Health is urging people who think they may have measles to phone before visiting their doctor. I tamaki makaurau mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Katie Scott Churahau.
Let's get to some of your feedback now. I'm returning to an interview early in the program with the Housing Minister, Megan Woods. We got her back on the show today because a number of papers were released. Advice to the government was released on the Kiwi Build reboot. We're particularly interested in the progressive home ownership scheme. The Minister says the details are yet to be finalised, but that advice that was made public today said that those schemes work best for mid-income earners, not low-income earners. And the suggested earner bracket they were talking about was $80,000 to $97,000 per household. So I asked you what you thought was low income, and I also asked the Minister that as well. Some of you have got back in touch, and this one, kia ora, I am a secondary school teacher at the top of the salary scale of $78,000. I've been at the top of the scale for 10 years. I've been a widow for 7 years, so I am entirely responsible for my own care. I thought that I was on a good income compared to parents of the majority of my learners, and I am. However, even I could not afford the government's Kiwi Build homes, so how can the people in the community in which I work? And someone else has got in touch to say the coalition got our vote because we on the bottom of the rung were promised a roof. Election is looming and they better get their A into G, not happy and feeling betrayed. Do get in touch about that. Text us on 2101 or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. The so-called miracle baby in Fiji, who was found 10 days ago crawling near 5 dead family members at the top of a cliff, has been discharged from hospital. Nirmal Kumar, his wife, their daughter and 2 granddaughters were found on the morning of 26th of August in the Nasori Highlands, having disappeared 2 days earlier. A farmer discovered the crying baby and 4 of the dead family members lying in a pattern at the top of a high cliff and another of the dead adults nearby. Police believe they ingested an unknown toxic substance. The 1-year-old is now in the care of her mother, who hurried back to Fiji from Australia at news of the mysterious tragedy. Jenny Meyer reports.
When he heard the news about the deaths, Nirmal Kumar's younger brother Rajesh was travelling with family in India. Having returned swiftly to Fiji, Rajesh says the baby is now doing well, discharged from Lautoka Hospital and reunited with her mother, staying with family at Lingalinga near Nandi for at least a month. Rajesh says a New Zealand-based couple identified by police as people of interest in relation to the deaths used to live nearby and were well known to the family.
They used to come to Nirmal's house all the time. You know, whenever they come from New Zealand, they used to come here, like having dinner. And Nirmal, because he was a carpenter, maintenance, a helpful person, he used to help everybody,
Rajesh says the grieving family have heard a lot of rumours about what caused the deaths, but they don't know what is true. He has known the man who police have questioned since 1972, and they used to drink kava together. Rajesh says he knows nothing about speculation that the man was a so-called witch doctor, nor about his sister-in-law seeking help for pain from the suspect.
Well, my sister-in-law never mentioned anything to us. Even my brother never mentioned to us. And that's a thing I don't know.
The National Secretary for Sanatan Dharam Pratinindhi Sabha says the Hindu community is shocked and saddened by the deaths. Vigyan Sharma says Hindus throughout Fiji are extending their support to surviving family members. According to him, some people in Fiji believe in witchcraft, but he says it's not part of the Hindu religion and that witch doctors are usually asking for money.
I advise that the people should believe in God and not witchcraft or witchcraft doctors. They are humans, not a God. So believe in God, not in witchcraft and any malpractices anyone is doing. It is better to pray directly to God than to trust in this kind of witch doctors.
Reporter Felix Chowdhury says the Fiji Times has spoken to the father of the two dead girls, who said that while he wasn't aware of the suspect's reputation, the family did seek help from healers prior to his marital separation.
Some people refer to them as witch doctors, but some others refer to them as religious healers. So he said the family did go to visit a few of them during the period that he was living with them. And as far as this person of interest being a witch doctor, he's not aware of that. He said he does know him as a businessman, and that's about it.
He says the deaths have frightened the community.
I think it's just heightened awareness for safety of children, and once we find out what actually happened, then things might return to normal. This has been the high point of discussion. People are talking about it a lot. On social media, there's a lot of comments being made as well. So everything comes back to when the investigations will be completed and if someone will be taken to task over this issue.
Meanwhile, police investigations continue and officers are patrolling near the family home day and night. Rajesh Kumar appealed to the public to help police with any relevant information about the case. He says everybody is looking for justice, but that even if justice is served, they cannot get their family back. The couple who are of interest to police are Fiji's citizens but New Zealand residents. They told media they are innocent and are sad to have missed attending their friends' funerals. They are barred from returning to New Zealand and their lawyer would not be drawn on the timing of a court date for review of the stop departure order issued at the Lautoka High Court last week. This is Jenny Meyer.
Scientists researching the huge Greenland ice sheet say this summer's melting is one of the most severe on record. They say climate change is accelerating the rate of melting and the impact will be felt on coastal communities and low-lying areas thousands of kilometres away. The BBC's David Shookman has been visiting Greenland and sent this report.
The sea around us is choked with icebergs. There are so many, our boat struggles to get any further. More and more chunks like this are breaking off the Greenland ice sheet, and each one adds more water to the sea. Eventually, all of this ice will melt and raise the level of the ocean, only by a tiny fraction. But in the decades ahead, as the planet heats up, more ice here will melt, with potentially catastrophic implications right around the world. For low-lying countries like Bangladesh, even a small rise in sea level could pose a real danger. But if the melting accelerates, Florida and many other places will be severely affected during the course of this century. But in the worst-case scenario, parts of eastern England and dozens of cities around the world could actually go under unless new defences are built for them. For the people of Greenland, the flow of ice is increasing. It's a spectacular sight and a sign of a warmer climate that would be helpful, especially for farmers. We find cattle grazing on the shore beside the icebergs. But these young Greenlanders say they're worried that the more the ice here melts, the more flooding there'll be in other parts of the world.
It is scary because, well, we have no control of it, you know, and it is a lot of water.
If this continues, that it will someday just cover a whole country.
So what can be done? Well, a new forest might help. The scientists who study Greenland's ice hope these trees will soak up the carbon from all their flights.
I was criticized online for having a high carbon footprint, and I thought, okay, that's legitimate, but I can do something about it because I was aware of people planting trees here in South Greenland, and I got involved and we started to make it happen.
Planting trees won't stop more ice breaking into the ocean. Only action on a global scale could make any serious difference. And in the meantime, the melting here means seas everywhere are bound to rise.
And that's David Shookman reporting there from Greenland. We're getting a bit of feedback from you all about the fresh water policy that was unveiled by the government today. It would, well, place a number of restrictions around farming and nitrate levels, bring in mandatory standards around winter grazing and firmer requirements for fencing are just some of the things contained in there. Peter has got in touch to say you can hardly catch a salmon, trout or anything else now at the mouth of the Rangitata River. The dairy industry that has brought great prosperity to our country knows all too well to stop wrecking out clean and green rivers and waterways. I'm sure there's a difference between the small farmer putting food on his table for his family against the multi-million-dollar mega farm operations run by managers. I love New Zealand, says Peter. And Elton has texted in to say the worst streams are urban streams. The cities get a lot of taxpayer money and still put effluent into the sea. Yep, good point. And that was highlighted, wastewater was highlighted in today's report as well. Tessa has been in touch to say that ECAN was taken over by farming-friendly types. And when we came to, we had more cows than anywhere else in the country. Our rivers are foul and they survive by irrigation on dry land and should never have been allowed, says Tessa. On a completely different subject, Megan Woods, we spoke to the Housing Minister about this new progressive home ownership scheme the government is going towards. This person says, go easy on the government, Lisa. They only lambasted the last government for inaction on housing and got themselves elected. Now we know they lied to New Zealand just to get elected. Hey, thanks for joining us this evening. Don't forget you can check out all our stories online and the news team will keep you up to date through the evening. We're back tomorrow.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Federated farmers say the most draconian of the government's proposals for restoring the quality of the nation's waterways would effectively close the farm gate in some regions. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, says the farmers' response is at odds with what others in the rural sector have been saying. The man accused of murdering a Northland toddler has been acquitted and found guilty of manslaughter instead. And the police have acknowledged they destroyed some items gathered during the initial Pike River investigation, but they say they held no evidential value. Those are the headlines. Our next news will be at 7.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
When one child was asked who had touched him inappropriately, the child said dunderhead, stupid head and potato head. Well, dunderhead, stupid head and potato head were never charged, of course, but Peter Ellis was.
Lately with me, Karen Hayes, your late night eye on the latest headlines and the people who are making them.
Reasons to be cheerful. It's a new